Greetings and welcome back to room 303 and our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our walking through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now, finally, to passage 52 of Song of Myself. This is, of course, the final canto. We have been saying that these last cantos are the great crescendo to this Song of Myself, this integral pedagogy as we've been defining it, and now we come to the barbaric yop. Now, earlier we said that much of our lectures are inspired by the great Robin Williams and his classic movie, Dead Poets Society, and of course there's a famous scene about the barbaric yop. We now are finally going to get there. Whitman's, in some ways, invitation to keep reading, to keep seeking, and hey, I'll say what I said at the conclusion of our time together with starting from Pomanog. Dude, you made it. You've made it now to the end of every line of Song of Myself. That's a major deal that you've been able to take this journey with me. Let's now finish. But before we do, let's remind ourselves that the important line from part 4 that we have come back to again and again, both in and out of the game, and watching and wondering at it. I witness and wait. And you'll, in this passage, understand why we consider this such an important line, the waiting, as we get to the very end. Now, my hope is that at this point you have followed all of our work through LearnStrong.net, Talks with Walt down that left-hand side, all 24 poems of inscriptions, the starting from Pomanog 19 sections. Again, that last 19th section, you'll remember, it seems like a long time ago maybe that you were there with us, and it was like, wow, we finally made it through 19 sections. Of course, we've done something quite a bit more remarkable by getting to the end of the 52nd section of Song of Myself. My hope is that starting from our introductory comments all the way through passage 51, that you've been with us. And now we will look at passage 52. Hey, just to set you up at 2B. There's all kinds of echoes and all kinds of repetitions. Are you ready for this? The word I gets used 12 times in this poem. The word me gets used 7 times, and the word my or myself gets used 7 times. But it'll be most interesting, the last word. And we will finish this lecture by referencing the last lines of some of the great epics that we will argue stand alongside such an amazing poem. Passage 52. The spotted hawk swoops by and accuses me. He complains of my gab and my loitering. I, too, am not a bit tamed. I, too, am untranslatable. I sound my barbaric yop over the roofs of the world. The last scud of day holds back for me. It flings my likeness after the rest, and true as any on the shadowed wiles, it coaxes me to the vapor and the dusk. I depart as air. I shake my white locks at the runaway sun. I effuse my flesh in eddies and drift it in lacy jags. I bequeath myself to the dirt to grow from the grass I love. If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. You will hardly know who I am or what I mean, but I shall be good health to you, nevertheless, and fiber, and filter and fiber your blood. Failing to fetch me at first, keep encouraged. Missing me one place, search another. I stop somewhere, waiting for you. Now, maybe what's most significant, and we studied in punctuation, for example, in our discussions of Robert Browning's My Last Duchess and Porphyria's Lover, both of those ending in exclamation points. In the 1855 edition, and by the way, this poem is by and large the exact same poem from the 1855 edition by 1881, but there is one major difference, and it is the last piece of punctuation. In the 1855 edition, Whitman refused to end the poem with a period, or an exclamation point, or a question mark. There's something brilliant about that, and of course we'll have to talk about this as we now get into this. Let's go ahead and just start right away. What do we say about great writers? Well, they help us obviously become great, as we read, become great writers ourselves. What do we say? Show, don't tell. That is to say, detailed, and the detailed eye. Do you see it? The spotted hawk? He didn't say a hawk. The spotted hawk, that is to say, it's always for Whitman about this amazing eye that he has. And the minute, of course, that we think about hawks, we think about that great line from Macbeth in one fell swoop, right? And all of that. The spotted hawk swoops, and there it is. And of course, immediately we think about Macbeth and the fact that at the end of Macbeth Act 4, you'll remember Macduff is told everybody's gone. And of course, the energy that that elicits for the end of that play. The spotted hawk swoops by and accuses me. Hey, put this in your notes. This is a very American poem. It is the American epic. There's no question about it. But this poem, especially 52, is a remarkable American poem because of all of the usages. I mean, we're going to hear them all over the place, from swoops to gab to, obviously, the barbaric yawp, right? The spotted hawk swoops by and accuses me. In some way, think about it. This poem has been a poem that challenges or accuses, and now all of a sudden the hawk is accusing Whitman, accuses me. Again, used 7 times this word me. He complains of my gab and my loitering. I mean, there's no more American word than the word gab. And of course, this has been a poem of gabbing, of words, to quote, of course, our Hamlet. Loitering, of course, we've seen this, and leaning and loafing and loitering over and over again. These echoes are amazing through the poem. Then we will begin with the eyes. That is to say, the anaphoria and the repetition of I. 12 times now I will get used. I too. Notice the balance, the brilliant balance of this. I too am not a bit tame. In other words, Whitman will argue, I'm like this hawk that I'm looking at. There's no way to control me, to tame me, to in any way deduce me, explain me. Not going to happen. I too am not a bit tamed. I too am untranslatable. I mean, think about what the word translate means, right? To carry from one form into another form. It's impossible to translate this poem into other languages so well. I mean, it's just incredible to talk to anybody who's tried, and although lots and lots of people have tried. Untranslatable, translinguistic. In other words, you cannot put me into a certain kind of definition. He said in the last set of lines that he, of course, contains multitudes. Notice, he will finish this second set of lines. I sound, this has been a poem of sounds of voices. My barbaric yawp. What a great word. I mean, what an American word. What a fundamentally powerful word. My barbaric yawp over the roofs of the world. Did you notice it's the roofs of the world, not of America? Whitman understood, we're going to see this in our study of Passage to India, Whitman understood the universal nature of the poems that he was writing. He continues then with the idea of the end of the day. And we've been seeing this now in the very end of these cantos. The last scud, that is to say clouds of day, holds back for me. There's just a few more minutes left. We saw this in 51, now we're seeing it in 52. The gloaming, as it sometimes refers to. It flings my likeness. Again, this is a very American usage. It flings my likeness after the rest and true. Notice how this poem has been an attempt to try and find honesty, truth. As any on the shadowed wilds. And for those of you that are going, shadowed, he's played around with this before. Where's that echo come from? Well, of course, it's at the conclusion of passage 41. Remember, I am, he says, the womb of shadows, right? And busy by the womb of shadows. Here we are, on the shadowed wilds. It coaxes me, encouraging, right? To the vapor and the dusk. As we said, you ain't met no 200-year-old people. Which means what? Well, yeah, they taught it to you when you were swinging at that park long ago and the van was waiting. As we've said many, many times, I don't want to go to the van. You don't have a choice. You got to go to the van. It's time. In other words, Whitman is saying, it's time. It's the end, right? It's the end, and it's time to get ready to leave. He calls it departing. I depart, and it's an interesting simile, as air. It's almost as if we are watching the very body of Whitman go away, right? Into the air or into the dirt. I shake my white locks at the runaway sun. I told you hair mattered in this poem, and we end with these white locks. And again, all you got to do is just type in Walt Whitman images in Google image and just look at the amazing black and white images of Walt Whitman and this amazing head of hair that he had, this white hair. My white locks at the runaway sun. Notice this, I'm shaking my hair as if I don't yet want to leave. I love the image of Whitman swinging at the park and somebody saying to him, you got to go to the van. And he says, wait, just a few more words, just a few more words. I effuse, that is to say, I gift, my flesh in eddies, waves, and drift it in lacy jags. Now, a lot of people have pointed out that the typeset of Leaves of Grass in the 1855 edition didn't look like normal poetry at all. It ran all the way across the page. It looked more like prose and some kind of strange prose than poetry, and yet here it is, lacy jags. I mean, when you look, literally, just look at your deathbed edition and notice how the lines are jaggy. That is to say, lacy jags. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant construction. Of course, jags are dirt, right? I bequeath myself, notice this giving away now, myself to the dirt to grow from the grass I love. Leaves of grass, here we are back to dirt and growth. If you, and now we're going to get these three U's 3 times, they're almost like a mantra. If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. And then, of course, the brilliance of this is, well, passage 6, obviously, about dirt and uncut hair of graves is grass and death. But, of course, you'll remember in passage 46, as he was talking to us about what good students are like, he told us that one of the things he has to have is a pair of good shoes under my boot soles. You will hardly know who I am or what I mean. Now this I am construction, we have seen this over and over again, these echoes, of course, from the Exodus 3 passage as well, as we've said, I am. And what I mean, think about Odysseus. I mean, we're going to get to him in a second, because we have to, right? Because this is the great American epic. And so we got to put it alongside some other great epics. What is it about Odysseus that makes him so amazing? Constantly people want to know who he is. What's your name? Oh, my name is nobody. All the way through the poem, as we've said in our detailed lectures of the Odyssey, Odysseus is never himself quite sure who he is. Why? Because he's the man of constant sorrows. He's the modern man. He is the human of evolution, evolving. And here we're playing the same game. He says, but I will be good health to you. Nevertheless, reading Leaves of Grass is good for you. He says, it'll give you health and filter and fiber your blood. Notice we'll finish with blood. There's been a lot of references to the body, to blood, to everything else, semen, everything else. I'm gonna make your body stronger, physically and metaphysically, your body stronger. Then the last 3, brilliantly constructed. Notice how we've got the measured lines here of 3-3 to finish, right? Failing to fetch me. What an American usage, fetch. At first, keep encouraged. In other words, you're not going to figure me out. As the great Harold Bloom, the great critiquer and lover of Walt Whitman, pointed out so many times, Whitman promises what he never delivers, thankfully. When he never delivers, he says, I'm going to tell you exactly who I am, what I'm about. And then by the end of the poem he says, you're probably going to fail at figuring me out. But keep encouraged. This has been, of course, one of the central ideas of Song of Myself, and I would argue Leaves of Grass. It's a poem, it's a collection of poems of encouragement to help you. Missing me one place, search another. Now, again, we commented on the ways that the King James Version of the Bible is so influential for Whitman. That is to say, seek and you shall find, right? Search for me, another, search another. I stop somewhere waiting. I told you passage 4, witness and wait. Waiting for you, the third use of the word you. And of course, from passage 51, it was, hey, you're you up there, right? You're looking. The immediacy. As we say of Dante, and we'll get to him in a second, as we say of Dante, we have to say of Whitman as well. At the same time, so unbelievably universal, so unbelievably specific. Well, how are we going to finish this project? Well, to a great discovery reading, right? never ends. It's ongoing. You will read this poem, as you are now reading it with me, maybe young, but you will read it again and again and again. I wonder what it'll be like to read it at 50, at 60, at 80. It'll be fascinating for you to decide all of that. At 2B, all the echoes. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And I think, really, of all the things that influenced T.S. Eliot the greatest, I think it is this ability to echo. My words echo thus in your mind, he says in Burke Norton. I think that T.S. Eliot learned so much from Whitman, but certainly this, that you can keep coming back to it. There's these resonances, and after a while you go, I've heard this before. Oh yeah, I've heard this before. As well, the American voice. I mean, it's like he saved so much of it to prove. You want to know what an American voice is? Well, it uses words like swoops and gab and barbaric yap and scud and boot soles and fetch. Not going to hear Wordsworth, Byron Shelley Keats using words like that. No, these are American words, and this is an American poem. It's the American epic, which of course takes us to the great epics. Now, Whitman loved the epic tradition, and he wanted, of course, his poem to sit alongside the great poems. Well, then let's play the game of how all these poems end. These are, of course, the poems we loved in 303. How does the Iliad end? And so the Trojans buried Hector, breaker of horses. The last lines of the Iliad are about burial and death. How about the Odyssey, and how does that one end? So she, Athena obviously, commanded, he obeyed her, glad at heart. And Athena handed down her pacts of peace between both sides for all the years to come. The daughter of Zeus, whose shield is storm and thunder, yes, but the goddess still kept Mentor's build. And what's the last word, as we said in the Fagel's translation of the Odyssey? It is the word voice. Amazing. How about Virgil's Aeneid, the other great classic that would, of course, have been ever present in the mind of Whitman as he finished his poem? Well, of course, we're going to have the famous fight and death scene, right? Never Pallas strikes his blow. Pallas sacrifices you now, makes you pay the price with your own guilty blood. In the same breath, blazing with wrath, he plants his iron sword hilt deep in his enemy's heart. Turnus's limbs went limp in the chill of death. His life breath fled with a groan of outrage down to the shades below. More images of death and dying. Speaking of, how can we play it with Dante? Well, let's play our last lines from the Divine Comedy, right? Here we go, Paradiso, Canto 33. My power now failed, that fantasy sublime, my will and my desire are both revolved, as in a wheel, in even motion driven, by love, which moves the sun and other stars. Can you hear the resonances? And then, of course, we've got to do it because the epic of all epics in the English language, of course, for Whitman had to have been Milton. And so let's finish here with this one. Some natural tears, of course. This is the departure scene, right? Some natural tears they dropped. By the way, it's an elided verb for Milton. Go back and look at it. It's why I think Whitman does this elided project in the deathbed edition. But wipe them soon away. The world was all before them where to choose their place to rest, and Providence their guide. They, hand in hand with wandering steps and slow, through Eden took their solitary way. They go on a journey, that is to say, song of the open road. Well, there it is, to finish now 3B. So the poem is now yours, it's ours, and maybe we'll continue with these talks with Walt. I'll also be waiting somewhere for you as we turn now to Children of Adam. Oh, that's interesting, given we just read Milton and Paradise Lost final lines. Thank you, this has been a blast.